Located in Grange, Illinois, Cafe 36 is owned by high school sweethearts, Terry and Carol Gilmer. Offering a fine dining menu, the local couple had been running their American bistro for 2 years, since Terry purchased the business, making his culinary dreams come true. But when Gordon arrives, he finds just 11 customers in the large dining room, which can seat 85. The co-owners can't understand what is keeping customers away, but it's a big problem. They haven't been able to pay themselves in the 2 years since the purchase. Despite nearing retirement age, Terry takes on most of the jobs around the restaurant, cleaning floors and bathrooms himself, rather than leaving it to his staff. And it appears he doesn't catch everything.
Always makes me feel nervous when I sit next to plastic grapes caked in dust.
Gordon's order, which contains just 3 items, doesn't appear from the kitchen, despite the restaurant being almost empty. His food arrives on an old-fashioned trolley and sits on old, dirty plates. But the owners have full confidence in Chef Pinto, so expect the food, when it eventually arrives, to be worth the wait.
I believe that the food here is well above excellence.
Chef Ramsay doesn't seem to agree. The wild mushroom risotto is mushy and way too salty. Barney, the sous chef, agrees, but Executive Chef Pinto does not. The duck salad is served with orange, strawberries, and candied walnuts. It's far too sweet. Finally, store-bought salmon crepes, the special of the day, are served in a hideous messy pile, which Gordon brands crap of the day, before sending it back to the kitchen, saying it's not even good enough for pigs. He heads back to meet Chef Pinto and questions his kitchen hygiene. The Cafe 36 head chef has a reputation for putting his fingers from his mouth into the food. But worse is to come. When Barney, the sous chef, checks the refrigerator, he brings out the rice used to make the risotto, and it's 8 days old.
There was no bad on stale food, nothing smelled bad.
Why in your tiny mind do you think it's still fresh from last Saturday?
Barney once again completely agrees with Gordon. They start emptying the refrigerator of anything that's over a week old, which includes rotten clams. Gordon sits down with the owners to share his concerns. Neither of them has ever owned a restaurant before, and they have put $1.1 million of their own money into their dream. Their home and savings are all gone. They are even sharing a single car. Gordon admires their level of sacrifice, but tells them bluntly that the food is the problem at the restaurant. They are shocked at Pinto serving stale and moldy food, and Gordon admits that he is panicking on their behalf. It's not a good start. Gordon goes back to the kitchen to investigate further and finds a mountain of frozen food and very few fresh ingredients. When he calls Pinto through to explain, he shares his unusual theory on fresh versus frozen food.
If you keep it frozen, fresh frozen, it tastes more fresh.
Fresh frozen, a kitchen nightmare's cliche if there ever was one. A disgusted Gordon calls him out on his laziness, as he simply reheats food for almost every dish on the menu. That evening, Gordon is ready to observe a dinner service, while the nervous owners watch on. He discovers that even the garlic butter for the escargot dish is portioned and frozen in advance, and asks Pinto for a single example of a menu item that he doesn't freeze. Pinto responds that the calamari comes in frozen, but he doesn't store it in the freezer, letting it thaw instead.
So the only stuff you don't freeze is the stuff that comes in frozen.
Gordon immediately finds the owners and tells them that Pinto and his frozen food are the problems. Unbelievably, despite simply reheating food for almost every customer, most have been waiting 45 minutes with nothing to eat. Pinto's response is that it would be faster if they had an extra chef in the kitchen. To pass the time, Gordon watches as food begins to leave the kitchen on outdated carts. When they arrive, the food is disappointing and undercooked. Dishes start coming back. Gordon spots a tray of asparagus, which Pinto introduces as the vegetable of the day. As the most expensive vegetable on the market, Gordon thinks it's a surprising choice for a struggling restaurant, particularly as it's out of season. Gordon is increasingly sure that the chef is taking advantage of the elderly couple, and they are beginning to believe him. As tables that have been waiting for up to 2.5 hours start to leave, Gordon again questions the pace in the kitchen, which is very slow.
Pinto has one speed, and that speed is you.
Owner Carol tearfully admits that she needs to consider the future. Gordon calls the team together and says that Pinto, as executive chef, is the problem with the restaurant. Barney and the server completely agree with him. Pinto admits that if he owned the restaurant, he wouldn't be serving frozen food, to which Gordon says he has no pride and is dragging the place down. Chef Ramsay promises that big changes are coming. The next morning, he's ready to overhaul the way the kitchen runs. He decides to start with the mushroom risotto, which is now going to be made with fresh rice. Next, he decides to use the trolleys to make a tableside goat's cheese fritter salad, while the servers deliver the other dishes by hand. He calls Terry to one side and once again tells him that Pinto is the problem, and he must start being firm with his staff to earn their respect and begin to turn his business around. Terry appears to agree. As the restaurant opens for the dinner service, the dining room starts to get busy. Orders hit the kitchen, and Pinto and his sous chef get to work. The tableside salads are a big hit, and the servers get them out to diners quickly, with great feedback. But the appetizers aren't coming through from the kitchen, with frustrated diners waiting 45 minutes, so there's no change there. The server is also increasingly frustrated, with tables that have waited well over an hour for food being unlikely to leave him a good tip. Pinto keeps promising a 5-minute wait every 5 minutes. Barney's lack of respect for Pinto is also causing friction. With the pair not working as a team, there is zero communication and the system has broken down. When risotto orders get mixed up, Gordon tells the pair they need to come together as a team. Customers are still waiting for food and beginning to walk out, along with the server's chance of making any tips. One of them has clearly reached the end of his rope.
Now I gotta say 2 things that are really hard. You're hiding, and you need to be fired.
Unfortunately, his comments don't land well with owner Terry, who is furious and has to stop himself from firing the server on the spot.
You're a waiter. Remember who you work for.
When service is over, Gordon calls the team together to find out how they felt it went. Pinto thought it went extremely well, while Barney felt it was a mess. Gordon agrees, but feels that he's identified the problems: slow, inconsistent food service, and a dated menu. He says goodnight and gets ready for a major makeover. The next morning, the team arrives to see the new Cafe 36, which the Kitchen Nightmares team has modernized and updated. Dull and dreary 1970s colors have been replaced with contemporary black and white decor, and the mismatched china has been switched out for clean and modern white plates. Cool black upholstery updates the look of the booths, and coordinating black chandeliers add some glamour. The menu has been updated too, and condensed down to make it more manageable. Fresh seasonal dishes include onion soup gratiné, crab cakes, steak tartare, and duck confit. The relaunch begins, and the kitchen prepares for the rush. A nervous Gordon is determined to turn things around for Terry and Carol. Dinner service starts well, with servers taking out dishes quickly to happy customers. But an hour later, the kitchen is starting back up, and Pinto goes silent once again. Gordon repeatedly calls his name and is completely ignored. Customers and servers are once again unhappy that the kitchen can't seem to finish any food.
It's just like really bad sex. Keeps going on, and at some point you just wish it would be over.
Having waited over 3.5 hours, furious customers cancel their orders and leave. Gordon points out that Chef Pinto hasn't taken charge of his restaurant. Terry steps up and starts expediting, and the kitchen gets back on track, with food reaching happy diners. Gordon sits down with the couple again and tells them that they have the potential to succeed. He is obviously fond of the pair and is impressed by their attitudes, but once again suggests that Pinto needs to go. Terry agrees that he needs to change and take charge of his business. The grateful couple gives Gordon a 30-year-old bottle of wine from their personal collection as a thank you for all he has done. He asks them to keep it for him at the restaurant and says they will share a glass together when he returns. The couple feel more positive about the future and are determined to make their dream restaurant work. And Gordon truly hopes that they achieve the success that they deserve. As a final footnote, we discover that Pinto left the restaurant the day after the relaunch, and his sous chef Barney was promoted into the newly vacant position. Did Pinto leave, or was he finally fired? We can't be sure. Sous chef turned head chef Barney was left in charge of the kitchen, but did he manage to turn things around for Terry and Carol? The Cafe 36 Kitchen Nightmares episode was filmed in February 2008 and aired almost a year later in January 2009. A local customer at the difficult dining service that Gordon observed pre-makeover agreed that the restaurant needed some help. And he also gave behind-the-scenes confirmation that the issues observed were an accurate depiction of how the restaurant ran, with no staging or prompting guests. Following Gordon's visit, reviews are very mixed, with an overall Yelp rating of 3 out of 5. Customers appreciated the modern interior created by Gordon's team, and some diners felt that the speed of service had improved. But others didn't, taking 3 hours to complete their meal. No speedy business lunches at Cafe 36, but is the ex-sous chef Barney to blame for the standards slipping again? Posting on a local food forum a couple of days after the episode aired, Barney revealed that while he had briefly taken over the kitchen from Pinto, he had chosen not to stay at Cafe 36. Instead, Chef Jorge Flores, who had been employed as his sous chef, had taken over the role. That's quite a few head chefs in quite a short time. A news report at the time showed that Terry was very pleased with his new hire, who seemed to be fitting in well. From the same article, we find out that it was Barney who had approached Gordon to give Cafe 36 a much-needed makeover, and it took 3 months to persuade Terry and Carol to agree. We can also see from the photo that Terry has gone back to wheeling the food out on those ancient carts, so it seems bad habits had returned. So the decor was great, the service was patchy, and the food was not worth wasting the calories on. Ouch. If it's true that Gordon only added a couple of new dishes, maybe he should have changed a little more. Sadly, Cafe 36 closed its doors for good in April 2009, just 3 months after the episode aired. And 2 months later, the building reopened as an Argentinian empanada restaurant. Reviews were very good, leading to a Yelp score of 4.3 out of 5. Their low-cost treats attract a very different audience to Terry and Carol's bistro experience. And the interior of the restaurant is unrecognizable as the swanky Cafe 36. But the business is obviously thriving because it's now been open for almost 15 years. But back to the team behind Cafe 36. Let's start with owner Terry. Viewers were conflicted about owner Terry. While some were rooting for both Terry and Carol, others were very uncomfortable with his furious interaction with the server. While the server may have been out of line, Terry's response was seen as an overreaction, particularly because he wouldn't, or couldn't, stand up to Pinto in the same way. And the frustrated server was just repeating what Gordon had been saying, while he watched his customers and his tips walk out the door night after night. But did his lack of leadership mean he deserved for his business to fail? Some viewers thought so. There was much sympathy for the server who was trying to help him save his business and received a tongue lashing in response. But there was another reason Terry's chaotic management of the restaurant doesn't make sense. Back to ex-chef Barney, he also shared online that Terry was an executive chef at a country club. And not just briefly, he was there for 20 years. It's hard to understand how Terry could overlook Pinto's painfully slow pace and sloppy attitude to the food when he had been in a similar role himself. And presumably, he could tell that some of the flavor combinations were a little off. Terry's reaction to the restaurant closing was also frustrating to many viewers, as he placed the blame for the restaurant's lack of success in many different directions, none of which pointed back to him. He blamed the economy, and he blamed Gordon's advice, which he seemed grateful for at the time and then failed to follow. In a news report soon after opening, he blamed the restaurant's name, which he felt was too closely related to the old owners. But it's clear that the food was the problem, and sous chef Barney had been telling Terry about Pinto's disgusting food hygiene habits for months. There's no record of Terry moving on to another job, so we are hoping that he is enjoying his retirement. As for Carol, she has shared a few photos on social media and seems to be enjoying time spent with family and grandchildren. Despite being accused of putting on an act for Gordon by, you guessed it, Chef Barney, Carol generally came across well in the episode. Viewers and customers were both supportive, particularly when they heard that her home and savings had been invested in her husband's dream. Let's hope they didn't have to start again financially, which seemed to be a real concern. And we also hope that Carol is enjoying a fun and happy retirement along with her husband. It certainly looks like it. Finally, let's see what happened to Chef Pinto when he left, or was removed from Cafe 36. It's safe to say viewers were as unimpressed as Gordon had been with Pinto's performance in the Cafe 36 kitchen. Many found it hard to understand why food took so long to leave the kitchen, when all Pinto had to do was warm up pre-prepared frozen dishes. Well, despite the difficulties he had with Gordon, Pinto, who is also known as Anup Das, continued to work as an executive chef in the greater Chicago area. His resume shows that after his 2 years at Cafe 36, he immediately found employment as a private chef for a wealthy family, a role he continued for 7 years. Next, he moved on to working for a super high-end catering company, which had been run by its British owner for 50 years. George Jewell specialized in catering the most glamorous events for the most glamorous guests, including dinners at embassies and elite house parties frequented by royalty, including Princess Diana. After a year, Pinto moved on again, this time working for just 6 months at a catering company called Hell's Kitchen. We're sure the name's Gordon Ramsay reference wasn't lost on him. There's no evidence of Pinto online after 2018, though we're sure with his newfound leadership ability and communication skills, he will have found another position. We're sorry that Gordon wasn't able to save Cafe 36 for the couple he became so fond of, and we wish the owners and staff well in the future.